I Trapped a Monster in My Gardenshed, Part 1. Faith is an interesting thing. Lots of people seem to have their own definition of it and may claim to have none at all. Everyone I meet has their own reactions when they find out I'm a preacher. Some are enthusiastic due to sharing the same beliefs, while others are polite but disinterested. Every once in a while, I do get the vicious insults from someone who had no issue with me until they found out about my religion, and I have to endure them screaming abuse until they stomp to their car, jump in and speed away in a sequel of blind fury. It's part of the job, as unpleasant as it can be, and I've learned to pay them no mind. Hate only begets hate after all. But there is a darkness in Barron County, a creeping evil strong enough to test even my faith. Shadows move in the woods, and it's not safe to go out at night anymore. No cars drive down our roads, and I haven't seen another human in close to a week. I hear dozens of gunshots from over the ridge almost every night, along with explosions. Not something normal, even for this rural community. Service is spotty at best, so my efforts to contact anyone else have been dismal failures. I'm only just managing to write this by the slimmest amount of reception, and even then, it could take several hours to just successfully upload it. My gut tells me that the county government knows far more than they're letting on, and if the night rangers over a new wilderness have any clues, they're playing their cards close to the vest. Still, my place is here, and 3 days ago, I decided that I would serve God best by finding answers to the trials that He has entrusted me with. So, with a lot of effort, prayer and ingenuity, I finally managed to trap one of the creatures in my garden shed last night. To be honest, I didn't think I'd be able to pull it off, and I could barely sleep afterwards in morbid curiosity. Granted, the creature screeched like a demon from hell, which I was fairly convicted it could be, but at least something like answers to this nightmare was within reach. The instant the sun began to rise and the cries of its fellows receded back into the trees, I got dressed and headed for the door. Damp grass swished under my shoes, clean and sparkling in the early morning sunrise. Red, orange and yellow tendrils of light poked over the low hills nearby, and acrid wood smoke from a chimney hung in the air like swirly silver curtains. A few birds chirped, happy as clams to see the day, and I couldn't blame them. The nights hadn't exactly been peaceful lately, and reminders of that still smoldered in the mound behind the parsonage from days past. A heap of fire-blackened skulls, frozen in death, their empty sockets craned skyward. God give them peace, whatever they are. Pausing in the yard, I turned to look back at the church, taking in the neat white clapboard siding, the gold-painted wooden cross on the steeple, and the slate-grey shutters. Ever since Stacy had been killed by a runaway semi-truck the previous June, life had been one catastrophe after another. I'd struggled to find a new church as a new pastor, fresh out of seminary, and my lack of success combined with the tragic loss of my wife nearly drove me to despair. All of that changed though, when I received a letter requesting my pastoral services. Upon reading it, I'd broken down in tears. Even in my worst doubts and sadness, God had provided. It took close to 14 hours to drive from my comfortable suburb home in Iowa to the Ark River Church of Redemption in Barron County, Ohio. Just finding it cost me 3 hours of driving, as my GPS seemed to struggle to keep its coordinates straight, constantly trying to take me to Wisconsin instead. The screen kept glitching the closer I got, sometimes showing no path at all, while other times it displayed my route clear as day. Cell phone service dipped erratically, and even my car radio bore mostly static going across the border from Noble County into Barron. At last, I'd come to the little white chapel nested in the rolling foothills of Appalachia. That would be my new home. No one had been there to greet me, but there was another envelope on the door with a key inside, and a letter explaining that the caretaker, whose name I've never received, had to leave early for retirement in Florida. The parsonage built onto the back of the church, came already stocked with food and water, along with a woodshed filled to the rafters, as the place was still heated by cast iron wood stove. With no fanfare whatsoever, Ark River was entrusted to me, my own slice of God's kingdom, perched atop a hill ringed with the old tombstones of past congregates, the grass mown flat so that I could see all around with relative ease. That's how I first noticed them so easily. In the chill of the morning dew, I bent one elbow against the cold barrel of my grandfather's Winchester rifle that lay slung across my back. Thick leather work gloves covered both hands, and clear plastic safety glasses sat perched atop my nose, since I wasn't about to risk anything getting in my eyes when it counted. Crude armor, fashioned from thick layers of last year's hunting magazines, were taped around my arms and legs, like the cardboard night costume I'd worn to a school play as a kid. Still, I trembled under my protective gear and fought hard against the urge to turn and run back inside. I'd spent the night shooting these things from the safety of the church's fortified windows, burning the corpses in heaps every morning with my dwindling stock of gasoline. If I ever wanted to be rid of them, I knew I'd have to confront these denizens of hell one-on-one eventually. With both gloved hands, I hefted the modified piece of PVC pipe I spent the last few hours making in the basement and took a deep breath. Here goes nothing. The shed door creaked and smacked off the side of the tiny, dilapidated building with a lazy clamor. Unlike the parsonage, which needed small repairs here and there, I had yet to decide whether I wanted to bother with the old Gardenshed at the edge of the tree line. A sad little brown hovel. It leaned to one side with a single door leading in and no windows to speak of, stinking of rot and mildew. It had been empty since the day I'd arrived, and I mostly ignored it, figuring it was full of termites. Thankfully, it seemed to be much stronger than I thought. From the inky shadows, a low, chittering gurgle rose in warning. A shape slunk forward, bent over on all fours, and a brace of fear rippled through me. God on high, I'd forgotten how disturbing they looked up close. The first time I'd awoken one night to a chorus of blood-curdling screams echoing just outside my bedroom window. I'd almost fainted in disbelief. I remembered how they wandered out of the moonlit tree line across the country road, aimlessly stumbled through the rows of gravestones, and screamed back and forth in arcane communication. It had taken me 3 long nights of stupid risks just to lure this one in here, and I gripped the skateboard taped sections of the pole I'd fashioned for myself like an ancient Roman spear. It's just one. I can handle one. Clearing my throat, I held up my small Bible, the pole still in my other hand, and summoned my best commanding voice. In the name of Jehovah God, I command you, demon, be gone! Seconds ticked by. Nothing. Not good. Again, I dug deep, prayed silently to God for wisdom and provision, and raised the word high. Be gone, servant of Satan, back to the pit whence you came. Still nothing. A part of me had suspected as much. I'm a devout man, not one to get too worked up over supposed reports of ghosts, cryptids, aliens, and the like. I have a fairly straightforward worldview when it comes to things science can explain. If it's not natural to this world, it belongs to the spirit realm, plain and simple. All that is light belongs to God, and all that is darkness is from Lucifer, and thus is cursed. Yet this thing didn't respond to the name of God, and while a smart part of me wondered if my faith was too weak, I decided that it was time for more earthly measures. Easy now. Falling back on plan B, I held the loop of thick nylon rope out from the end of the pole and flexed my stiff calf muscles. Easy there. Let's just take this nice and slow, yeah? It was the same tone I would have used for a rabid dog, the words more to give me some measure of calm and courage than to convince the grinning apparition they crouched in the musty shadows. They all did that, made those wide, eerie smiles that stretched to painful lengths, with milk-white eyes that glowed in the haunting blue moonlight. However, they didn't seem all that coordinated, some collapsing as if too exhausted to go on, others wailing with hands on their heads, looking to the sky in some strange form of grief. It was pitiful to watch from the boarded up windows of the parsonage, but I'd seen what they'd done to a random motorist when he'd foolishly stopped in the road the first night they appeared. There were still pieces of him rotting on the hood of his abandoned Jeep. Another low quark snapped me back to reality, and I blinked at the shiny-eyed fiend hunched just beyond the reach of the morning sunlight. She was small, though I guessed if she stood up straight, she would be maybe only a few inches shorter than myself, with torn, muddy clothes, no shoes, and long matted hair the color of the moldy tree bark. Crusty, black scratches ran all over her exposed skin, no doubt picked up in the forest, as most of them came from deep within the New Wilderness Wildlife Reserve just on the other side of the ridge. Her fingernails were chipped and cracked, the spaces between her stubby square teeth packed with rotting bits of viscera, and the blank white eyes stared at me with a strange, animalistic focus. I licked my dry lips, muscles tense, ready to use the pipe in my hand to keep her at bay at the instant she tried to pounce. They could move fast when they wanted to, like the creatures didn't have the mental prohibitions to prevent bone-breaking jumps or tackles, hence their myriad of injuries. With how black the blood is, maybe infection isn't something these things are worried about. As if reading my anxious thoughts, she made the characteristic grin that her kind used to frighten her victims into paralysis, and terror surged through my blood. Her hand darted forward, and 5 pale contorted fingers slid into the orange rays of the morning sun. For a moment, I almost thought I caught a small plume of smoke wafted through her grimy skin, and the air stank of stagnant water. A howl of pain, like I'd never heard any of the others make, came out of her fluid-filled throat, and the fiend scuttled backwards, shrieking and clicking with swollen vocal cords, as if cursing me and the sun beneath her fetid breath. Terrified, yet intrigued, I took a step closer to the threshold of the shed and jabbed my makeshift dogcatcher's loop into the dark. Not a fan of sunlight, huh? Speak, demon. I am a servant of Adonai, and I demand you to speak. She returned my approach with a hateful snort at the nylon loop, and leapt at the far wall with a nut force that the structure rattled on its foundation. Yet the moldy plywood didn't give, and the thing collapsed to the floor with a mournful shriek that almost sounded frightened for how high-pitched it was. I always pictured demon-possessed people to be more powerful, and while these things were frightening enough, I started to wonder if, perhaps, this was something natural, not spiritual. If it's some kind of bioweapon or pathogen, I'm done for. I've got no protection, no gas mask, no hazmat suit. I might as well chain myself to a tree and wait. Shaking off the creeping doubts, I tried to get the loop over her head, but the creature ducked out of the way. One greasy hand snatched the end of the pole and yanked it from my grasp. With a sequel of triumphant delight, she gnawed at the top like a dog. And when that didn't produce anything edible, the fiend hurled my weapon back into the yard with contempt. As if upset at being deceived, she growled and slammed her dirty fists on the wooden floor in an almost ape-like tantrum. Huh, I didn't tell you try eating it. I scooped the pole off the grass, my eyes never leaving her, in case the sun hatred was a front to get my guard lowered. Besides, it can't be any worse than the stuff my thoughts trailed off the way she looked at me, focused with an intense fascination on my hands, as though there was something hypnotizing about them. At first, a brace of fear ran through me once more, but the second I moved my left arm, the fiend's head twitched to follow it. Glancing down, I stared at the watch Stacy got me for my last birthday, and a twinge of pain rippled in my chest. Something to help you keep track of time, now that you're an old man. I could hear the soft, teasing voice in my head, the love in it, the warmth, how happy I'd been then, how simple things were. Very funny. I'm only turning 28, not 50, babe. And you're only a year behind me, so... My smile felt foreign after not wearing one for weeks on end, remembering how we'd laughed together, danced in the living room and ate cheesecake while watching Jurassic Park, our favorite pastime from when we were dating. I remembered how we were buried deeper beneath the blankets after the credits rolled, the taste of her lips, and Stacy's head on my chest afterward, her hair smelling like sweet roses, my wife, my world. Gone. Grief tugged at my composure, and I felt hard against the tears that pooled in my eyes. No, you can't have it. It's mine. The creature cocked her disgusting head to one side, as though she couldn't quite understand. Too frustrated to be rational, I waved my arms like she was a plane trying to land in an unsafe runway and snarled back, "It's mine, not yours, no!" At the sweep of my left arm, the fiend jumped to the side of the shed, pouncing on the spot as if she'd been after something. When she lifted her hands, there was nothing there, but that didn't stop the critter from craning her head around, wide eyes probing her surroundings. I caught the flicker of morning sunshine on the glass of my watch, and a wave of curiosity helped to smother the painful memories. "Wait, you want to play?" She sat back on her haunches like some primordial nightmare and frowned, clanking her wooden teeth in disappointment. With a flick of my wrist, I flashed a small ball of white sunlight at the opposite wall, and her milky eyes locked onto it. The ragged being hurled herself across the shed, sludge crusted lips pulled wide in an eerie grin that gave me goosebumps. Man, she could move fast. Like, the skinny thing lacked any sense of how much she might hurt herself. Yet, she still looked so innocent, as if the game amused her. The shed a momentary inconvenience, and the strange pole-wielding creature that held her prisoner no more than a curious new addition to her bizarre world. What? She's not a stray kitten, Adam. Adam, she's an offense to nature. Likely some kind of demon from hell. Get your goddamn head in the right place. But even as I mentally chastised myself, a new idea formed inside my brain. Grinning, I held up a hand, as if the creepy humanoid could understand what that meant. "Wait here, I'll be right back." 10 minutes of rummaging through my still packed moving totes later, I returned with the cheap, full-length mirror I'd purchased after dropping our old one when Stacy and I first moved to our home in Iowa. I figured a big light would be even more intriguing for the creature, but the second I set it down, she went rigid. I watched as the fiend stared at their own reflection, as still as a statue. Hazy eyes roamed over the image of her filthy limbs, moldy hair and inky scratches, taking it all in. Her knees wobbled and creaked, but with small, unsteady movements, she stood up. My jaw almost dropped, seeing her fully upright, poised like a normal human. The thing's eerie smile melted away, and her face fell into what looked like shock. It seemed as if something inside her had shifted, clicked like a broken bone moved back into place, and the primal antics from before vanished completely. In that moment, with the stunned expression of her dirty face, she appeared more human than ever. Both her grubby hands trembled, and the creature took a hesitant step forward, reaching out towards the glass as if to take her reflection's hand. She stared into her own eyes, and a black dot formed at the inside corner of one thin eyelid. It grew bigger and bigger, swelling until the fluid spilled over her sticky lashes and ran in a long, dark river down her pale face. 2 small tickles of ebony sorrow that flooded over her cheeks, and the fiend lifted her hand to brush at them. Her touch was lighter, not as rushed or unrestrained, as if she had awoken from some nightmare, only to find herself in another one, and was trying to make sense of it all. Confusion edged across her features. The fiend looked down at her cracked fingernails in horror, dark sludge glistening on them like blood. Her eyes screwed shut as she covered her face with both hands and screamed. Between my fingers, the mirror shattered into 1,000 different pieces before I ever let go, and a throbbing slashed through my head. I stumbled backward, landing on the grass with a ringing in my ears, and my heart pounded like a tripe hammer. The gun, get your gun, she's going to kill you. Twisting on the ground, I dragged the rifle from my back and thumped the hammer down. I turned to level the muzzle of the 30-30 at her, finger on the trigger. She lay on the floor, curled into a ball, 2 skinny arms wrapped around her knees. The fiend's entire body shook and trembled, like she was freezing to death. But somehow, I didn't think the morning chill bothered her. It was as if she'd been stunned by a taser, zapped into immobility, and despite my pulse still racing from the scare, I felt a twinge of remorse. I'm sorry. She didn't respond to my apology, not that I expected her to. Instead, the creature just lay there and shook, her silence deafening after all the strange noises she made before. Whatever I'd done by showing her the mirror, it had incapacitated her in a rather grave way, and I decided not to bother her for a while. I needed time to think, to process what I just witnessed, and try to formulate a plan of action. Shutting the shed door, I locked it with the rust padlock that had been on when I arrived, and headed for the parsonage, too mentally exhausted to do much else. The rest of the day I spent quietly checking my barricades, inventorying my food, and trying to call the sheriff's office, only to get sent straight to voicemail. By the time night fell, I could hear the screams of the other fiends coming from the forest, so I locked my doors and doused all the lights, save for this laptop I'm using. I'm not sure what's going on, be it demonic or something else. Perhaps I could search the internet for answers, but I luckily just get this posted correctly. The creature in the shed is screaming again though, and I have to admit, a part of me feels bad for her. I have no idea what I'm dealing with, and since I'm assuming it's not spiritual, then it must be biological, in which case I'm hopelessly lost to how I can help her. Granted, that's if aiding such an entity is possible at all. Perhaps she doesn't want my help. Perhaps the most merciful thing to do would be to wait until morning and use my grandfather's rifle to end her suffering, for she, like the rest, is clearly in torment. I have to go. I think the fiends outside are trying to rip down the shed door. They're stubborn and brave for trying to rescue their comrade, I'll give them that. As much as it might weigh down my conscience later, I'll have to put them down, or this entire experiment will be a failure. God, forgive me.